The cabin sits at the very end of Corm Hollow Road, far beyond where the county stops paving the road and even the GPS gives up, leaving nothing but a blank gray screen. It rests on 11 quiet acres with a solid stone chimney and a wraparound porch that creaks in one familiar spot near the front door, a spot I've already learned to avoid. I paid $340,000 for it in cash. The money left my account in a single wire transfer on a Tuesday morning while I sat alone in my car outside a box store. I didn't trust myself to make that payment from home. I was afraid someone would walk in, ask what I was doing, and somehow make me feel guilty for finally spending money on myself. I'm 34 years old, and that cabin is the very first thing I've ever bought that belonged only to me. That's important to know before I tell you what happened next. Without that piece, my decision might seem heartless. But after lying awake under the cabin's sloped ceiling, listening to the wind move through the tall hemlocks night after night, I've realized it wasn't heartless at all. It was the first time in 10 years that I chose myself. Over the years, I paid for Grandma Mima's hip surgery when Medicare wouldn't cover the better surgeon. I paid off my cousin Dustin's truck, not once but twice. The first time he sold it, bought an even worse one and called me to cover the difference. I paid Aunt Pam's electric bill every winter because Uncle Ray's disability check always ran out before the middle of the month. And somehow every call came to me. Never my brother. Never anyone on my cousin Fiona's side of the family. Always me. As if everyone had silently agreed that if they needed money, Valerie would find a way. I don't say that with bitterness. For a long time I truly believed I enjoyed helping them. Maybe I did. Or maybe I repeated that story so many times that it eventually felt true. I work in medical device sales. I'm on the road 4 days a week. I don't have children. I don't have a husband anymore either. Our marriage ended 2 years ago without shouting or drama. We simply became two people who no longer had anything left to say. Somewhere along the way, I also became the family's personal ATM. A furnace breaks? Call Valerie. A child needs braces? Call Valerie. An unexpected bill shows up? Call Valerie. I used to answer before the phone finished ringing. The cabin was supposed to change that. I intentionally bought it 2 hours away from everyone I knew. I never posted photos online. I only told my mother because, well, she's my mother. I asked her not to tell anyone else. She tried. But 11 days later, Aunt Pam already knew. I remember exactly how long it took because that's when the first text arrived. When is everyone coming to see the cabin? I politely replied that I wanted some time alone first. I still had boxes to unpack, needed to figure out the wood stove, and barely knew where the propane shutoff valve was. Normal things. Reasonable things. That conversation happened on Thursday. By Saturday night, only my second night sleeping there, I still hadn't hung a single picture. Boxes filled what would eventually become my office. Then my phone lit up. It was Dustin. We're bringing the whole family up next weekend. Aunt said you owe us the space. Asterisk asterisk. I read the message once. Then again. Then a third time. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood it. But I hadn't. You owe us the space. As though the cabin belonged to everyone. As though it had been bought with family money instead of 9 years of skipped vacations, endless work trips, and a marriage that slowly faded while I spent my life earning money for everyone except myself. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped onto the porch wearing only my socks. The cold crept through the wooden boards and settled into my feet. The darkness out there was complete. No streetlights. No gas stations glowing in the distance. Only black outlines of towering trees and a sky packed with so many stars they looked unreal. Standing there, I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile that appears when something finally makes sense after years of confusion. I went back inside, switched on the porch light and left it glowing in the darkness. Then I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, placed a legal pad beside it, and began making a list. There's one thing people never tell you about buying property in a small rural town. The person who sells you the house usually knows the locksmith, the tow truck driver, the sheriff's deputies, and just about everyone else. My realtor, Carol, had lived in Piney Fork her entire life. She had an opinion about every person in town, and before closing she handed me a business card. Asterisk, if you ever need help, call Jerry. He handles gates, snow plowing, repairs, pretty much everything. Tell him I sent you. Sis. That Saturday night, a little after 9, I called him. He answered on the 4th ring with a television blaring in the background. Jerry speaking. Hi, this is Valerie. I bought the old Hensley place on Corm Hollow Road. Oh, the cabin with the stone chimney, he said immediately. That's a solid house. It is, I replied. But I have a problem. I didn't tell him my entire family history. I simply explained that relatives planned to show up without permission, and I needed the gate secured before the weekend. You just want a new code? He asked. No, I said. Replace the whole system. New keypad. New code. I don't want anyone using the old one. He agreed to do it. That took care of the gate. The next problem was the driveway. The gravel entrance in front of the cabin looked charming in the listing photos, but every inch of it belonged to me. It wasn't public property, and it certainly wasn't free parking for unexpected family gatherings. So I called the only towing company in Piney Fork. The owner, Reese, answered. I explained that I wanted a tow truck on standby over the weekend in case vehicles had to be removed from private property. Like abandoned cars? He asked. Like trespassing vehicles, I answered. I'll have signs posted. Everything will be documented. I just need someone who can respond quickly. Reese didn't ask many questions. In a small town, people know family problems can get messy. A few days later, I met with an attorney named Whit Anders. His office sat above the local pharmacy and smelled of old carpet and pipe tobacco. This time I told the whole story. Whit explained exactly what I needed. A formal no trespass notice, properly written and legally delivered. He also taught me something I hadn't known. In North Carolina, once someone receives written notice that they aren't allowed on your property, ignoring that notice is no longer just a family disagreement. It's trespassing. And at that point it becomes the sheriff's responsibility, not yours. I asked him to prepare 2 copies. One was for Aunt Pam. The second went into a waterproof envelope, taped to the gate in case nobody bothered reading the first one. By Wednesday, Jerry had installed the new keypad. The old access code no longer worked, including the one Dustin had memorized while helping me move in. By Thursday, Reese confirmed he'd be ready if I called. Friday evening, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the porch light glow across the gravel driveway. For the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Peace. The cabin finally felt like it belonged to me. They arrived Saturday afternoon. 3 vehicles. Dustin's pickup. Uncle Ray's Buick with Aunt Pam in the passenger seat. And Fiona's little Honda, packed with coolers, folding chairs, and enough supplies to stay for days. They clearly expected to make themselves at home. I wasn't there when they arrived. That part matters. I'd spent the morning in Piney Fork, eating a slow breakfast at the local diner before reading a paperback for hours, enjoying the rare feeling of having nowhere I needed to be. Around 4 o'clock my phone rang. It was Reese. We've got 3 vehicles at your gate, he said. The code doesn't work. They parked on the shoulder and walked up the driveway. That's still my property, I said. It is. There was a brief pause. Just give me the word. I looked out the diner window for a moment before answering. Do it. I drove back toward the cabin around 6 that evening. The sky had turned a deep purple as the sun disappeared behind the ridge. Before I even reached the house, I could hear my family. Uncle Ray's voice reached me before the cabin did. Someone had a radio playing from the back of a truck. A folding table stood in the middle of my yard, covered with a plastic tablecloth that snapped in the breeze. They had actually set up camp. On my property. As if my cabin were a public campground instead of the home I'd worked years to afford. Aunt Pam spotted my headlights first. She marched toward my car with her arms crossed, already wearing the expression she always used when she decided she was the victim before anyone had spoken. Valerie, what in the world? She demanded. Your gate wouldn't open. We had to carry the coolers all the way up here. Ray's knee is killing him. Pam, I said quietly. That was all. I hadn't prepared a speech. By the middle of the week, I'd realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation. You got Dustin's text, didn't you? She asked. I did. Well, we're family. I didn't invite you. She blinked. I told Mom I wanted time alone. 11 days later, Dustin tells me I owe everyone space in a house I bought with my own money. Now you've turned my yard into a picnic ground. Dustin walked over, shoving his hands into his pockets. It's only for a couple of days, Val. Don't make this into something it isn't. Family shares. Family asks, I replied. They don't announce they're coming. At that moment, flashing amber lights appeared at the end of the driveway. The tow truck. I watched every face change in the same order. Confusion. Recognition. Then panic. Uncle Ray slowly climbed out of his chair. Now hold on just a minute. As though raising his voice could somehow undo what was already happening. I took the envelope from my bag and handed it to Aunt Pam. I didn't smile. I didn't lecture her. I simply waited while she opened it. Under the warm glow of the porch light, her hands trembled as she read the no trespass notice. When she looked up, I spoke calmly. Anyone who comes onto this property without my permission is trespassing. I paused. That includes you. Across the yard, Fiona quietly began folding up the tablecloth. No one had asked her to. She simply understood before everyone else that the day was over. Down by the road, Reese's driver had already hooked Dustin's truck to the tow truck. Dustin hurried after him, arguing that he'd parked legally. I let him argue. Just not with me. Aunt Pam stood silently, staring at the notice. For the first time, I saw something different in her face. Not anger. Not embarrassment. It looked like the collapse of a belief she'd carried for years. She had always assumed I'd say yes. That I would always pay. Always help. Always give. She had never imagined there could be a boundary. Because in her mind, that boundary had never existed. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Your mother is going to hear about this." I nodded. She already knows I bought this cabin. She can hear the rest too. No one had another argument after that. Before darkness settled over the hills, they packed everything and left. Uncle Ray limped slowly back toward the road. Dustin's truck disappeared behind the tow truck, headed for the impound lot where he'd have to pay to get it back himself. Fiona was the last to leave. Before climbing into her car, she looked back at me. She wasn't angry. If anything, she looked relieved. As though seeing someone finally say no made her believe she might be allowed to someday. When the last taillights disappeared down Corm Hollow Road, silence settled over the property. The porch light still glowed above me. I left it on. I sat alone on the top step, listening to the wind move through the trees. The rocking chair I planned to buy wasn't there yet. The porch was empty. But somehow it had never felt more complete. 11 acres. No voices. No demands. Just peace. That's when I understood something. Love that only flows in one direction isn't really love. It's an endless bill that no one ever intends to pay. You don't have to earn the right to lock your gate. You don't have to apologize for protecting your peace. And you're allowed to own one place in this world where the only vote that matters is yours.